Hey everybody, it is Sunday evening, September 7th. Something that I've talked a little bit about is the fact that our new U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Judge Janine Piro, and her office, over the last 3 weeks since Donald Trump turned multiple federal law enforcement agencies and the National Guard loose in Washington, D.C., they've made slews of arrests. I mean, probably 1,500 arrests. And they're charging people with federal crimes, federal felonies. And as part of that process, they have to get an indictment from a grand jury. Grand juries are comprised of citizens from the jurisdiction where the arrest occurs. So these grand juries are comprised of citizens of Washington, D.C. And they're having a hard time getting indictments on the charges that they're bringing. And which is, it could be a form of protest on the part of grand jurors. It could be just a reflection that they are wildly overcharging people with crimes that should be misdemeanors and they're trying to get felonies. Or could even in some cases be citations. But the federal grand juries in Washington, D.C., in some cases, are standing up against Trump and Janine Piro and his Department of Justice. It's really an amazing thing. It is astonishingly rare for a federal prosecutor to present a case to a grand jury and have that grand jury not return an indictment on the charges that the federal prosecutor has requested. But that's happened 7 times in the last 3 weeks. And so let's talk about those. But I mean, grand jury proceedings are secret, so we don't know the specific reasons. But it stands to reason that it's somewhat a form of protest on all of these federal law enforcement officers and the National Guard being turned loose in the communities where these grand jurors live. But that's the pool that Judge Boxawine and her prosecutors have to pick from. There was a judge named Judge Saul Wachtler, former New York judge, that said, he's the one who came up with the phrase that a decent prosecutor can get an indictment against a ham sandwich. So for this reason, when there's a grand jury proceeding, it's not a trial, okay? A prosecutor wants to bring an indictment and they have to present just enough information to a grand jury to support that indictment. The defendant is not there. The defendant is not represented. And the defendant nor their counsel, they don't get any opportunity to participate or cross-examine any witnesses who testify. There's no judge present in a grand jury. It is just the prosecutor presenting what they want to the grand jury, and the grand jury, 99.995% of the time, comes back with the indictment that the prosecutor is asking them for. And so it's like my best guess is that these grand juries, they're pissed off about what Trump is doing to their city. They're angry that there's National Guard all over the place and that these federal law enforcement guys are just snatching people off the street and overcharging them. And they're seeing real life examples of prosecutorial overreach, and they're going to exercise what power they have in that circumstance and say, no, we're not going to rubber stamp this shit for you guys. The one case that's gotten the most notoriety is the guy who threw the sandwich. I think his name was Shawn Dunn. He was a paralegal at the Department of Justice, and he was taunting cops and protesting one night, and he threw a fucking Subway sandwich at one of them, and then he took off running. After they identified him, he contacted the Department of Justice and offered to turn himself in, and they said no, which is ridiculous. And instead what they did was they sent 20 fully tactically geared, straight out of the military, like SWAT cops to go smash in his front door and destroy his home and drag him out into his front yard and handcuff him so that they could get viral footage for Twitter. Yeah. And the people who live in these communities are seeing all of this, and they don't like it. And those are the people who get to serve on these grand juries. So he threw a sandwich at a cop, and Judge Box of Wine indicted him for felony assault on a police officer. And the grand jury said no. And they had to reduce his charge to a misdemeanor, and he was released on his own recognizance. Then there was another woman named Natalie Rose Jones, a woman from Indiana who was arrested on felony charges of threatening to kill Donald Trump on social media. Ms. Jones has been described, I'm going from a New York Times article that came out last Saturday, the 6th, by a guy named Alan Fewer, named Grand Juries in D.C. Reject Wave of Charges Under Trump's Crackdown. In the article, Ms. Jones is described by her friends as being mentally ill. She was taken into custody on August 16th after she attended a rally. They interviewed her, and she said that Donald Trump was a Nazi and that she wanted to disembowel him. So she was charged with felony. They failed to return an indictment against her. The grand jury did. Then there was another guy named Edward Alexander Dana, a self-described person with intellectual disabilities, who was arrested on August 21st for having threatened to kill Donald Trump after having had 7 alcoholic beverages. Video from when he was in custody showed Mr. Dana at the police station cordially thanking the officers and then lying on the floor, singing and yelling non sequitur, incomprehensible statements. The grand jury refused to indict him as well. This started in Los Angeles after the Los Angeles protests. Grand juries in LA were refusing to return felony indictments against some of the protesters that were arrested. Judge Box of Wine, Janine Piro, is very angry about this. And she just says, well, these people are so normalized to crime that they don't recognize crime when they see it. And she and Trump have long complained about the liberal bias of the jury pool in Washington, D.C., completely forgetting that grand juries from Washington, D.C. indicted hundreds of people who were arrested on January 6th. So take what you want from that. In one of the cases, there was a magistrate judge named Zeia Farooqi. He has spoken out repeatedly against her office. He excoriated prosecutors for trying to convince him that he needed to be highly deferential to their request to keep a secret search warrant, keep it secret. And he wrote, blind deference to the government, that is no longer a thing. Trust that has been earned over generations has been lost in weeks because of their actions. He said that they were losing credibility, the DOJ, in some of these cases. And he used to work for that office, and he has lambasted his former office for overcharging defendants in what he said appeared to be an effort to get attention on Twitter or Truth Social. He also criticized Ms. Piro for having one of her underlings handle the dismissal of a case instead of doing it herself. He said, when I was an AUSA, Assistant U.S. Attorney, and something had to be dismissed or difficult decision had to be made, the criminal chief appeared, the U.S. Attorney appeared, because that's what leaders do. That's leading from the front. And then she, of course, excoriated him on social media, further proving his point that they're doing all of this shit for social media clout. And one of their bottom considerations is actually following the law. So Judge Box of Wine's been having a tough time in court. I love that for her. And, let's hope it continues. And thumbs up to Washington, D.C. grand juries that are standing up to this shit. You guys are doing the real work. Thank you.